Welcome, everyone. I think we can make a start. Good evening. I'm Councillor James Husband, Chairman of the Planning Committee, and you're very welcome at this meeting this evening. To my right, I'm joined by my fellow councillors, and it will be the five of us who will make decisions in front of us this evening. To my left, I'm joined by council officers who will present the reports in front of us and also offer us advice. And they are led this evening by Amanda Reid, who's the Director of Planning and Place, lady sitting on my immediate left. Okay. If I can ask first, are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. There are no apologies for absence this evening.
Very good. Are there any declarations of interest, colleagues? Are there any other declarations? Oh, Arian.
Thank you, Chair. I know one of the consultants, but we haven't had a discussion.
Okay.
The applicant, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Chairman, can I just
Yeah,
check
yeah.
that Councillor Aretti has got an open mind considering this application?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I was shocked to see my old friend here. So yeah, very clear mind. Yeah, just.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, in that case, we can rapidly move on. There are actually no minutes this evening, so we can move immediately to the application in front of us, which is for Unit 10 in Latimer Road. And I think Fiona Ray. Fiona, you're going to introduce this case, aren't you? So please, when you're ready, Fiona, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application before you this evening is for the demolition of the building known as Unit 10 Latimer Industrial Estate. Planning permission is sought for the erection of a Part 3, Part 5-storey building with commercial use at ground, first and second floor, with 8 residential units above. Officers would like to make a correction to paragraph 7.1. An additional payment of £8,000 is required for the removal of crossovers and for amending the traffic order. That's through the Section 106. And that responds to, in the addendum, you would have seen condition 11 removed. Turning to the addendum, attention is also drawn, firstly, to the St Quintin Woodlands and Neighbourhood Forum, plus the St Helens Residents Association's objection. That was included in full in your report pack, but just added again in the addendum because we didn't draw out in the report that it was specifically from them. And also 9 additional representations that have been received since the report was published. We've also got a note from the applicant within that pack and other amendments to the reports and conditions you should be aware of. So turning to the slides, firstly I've shown a contextual site location plan. Shows the location of a commercial warehouse that's of its time from the late 1970s. The plot is actually wider than most within that industrial estate because there's a small substation and some land to the north. And to the rear you can see is the railway line, an embankment, and the boundary with Hammersmith and Fulham. Opposite the site is the recently extended Oxford Gardens and St Quintin's Conservation Area, which was extended in October 2021, and the site forms part of the employment zone. Now, importantly, the St Quintin's Woodlands Neighbourhood Plan identifies the site as having potential for refurbishment and or redevelopment, and notes that residential units could be used to make this viable. Some more images for you, 3 aerial images I've included. This just shows the pattern of development in the context of the Latimer Industrial Estate. You can see the railway and embankment behind, here, and development over in Hammersmith and Fulham over this side. Importantly, this is the conservation area boundary along here that's also identified on the site plan in your pack. This is an aerial image looking south, and you can see the industrial estate down here, those low-rise buildings and the scale of those in relation to these properties that reach a maximum height of approximately 3 stories on the other side. You can see the Westway and much higher development across the borough boundary. An aerial image looking northeast. Importantly, this is the industrial estate here and the properties opposite that are in the conservation area. Turning to some site photographs. This is the application site. It's a 1970s building, quite a utilitarian appearance, squat proportions. It doesn't positively contribute to the neighbouring conservation area, but it is of its time, and it makes it a contribution to the employment zone with Class E floor space on the site that is currently occupied. There's another photo of the application site, just looking the other way. And you can see the street tees to the front there that we are recommending us protected by condition 10. This is a site photo looking south, showing you those separation distances to the properties directly opposite. And a site photograph showing unit number 1 of the Latimer Industrial Estate that has been redeveloped in 2019, number 2 and number 3 for context. So that's further down the site south, from the site south. This is an existing floor plan that shows you the existing Class E use, 558 square metres at the moment, with a small substation on the side. And this is the additional kind of open space that is on this particular site. Elevations of that building you've just seen within the photographs and aerial images. And firstly, the proposed street level plan. So the commercial units are proposed to be a flexible use and set over 3 floors, this being the first at ground floor. The proposed commercial floor space will reach 1,198 square metres, which is an uplift of approximately 640 square metres. You can see the setback from the frontage that's proposed and retained, and the zigzag frontage we talk about within the report. This helps, in our opinion, to articulate the bulk across what is a relatively wide site. The layout has 2 separate entrances at the front, one for residential and one for commercial. And then going up to the first floor, further commercial floor space. Just draw your attention to 2 small side windows that are proposed, but not with any particular outlook or reliance on natural daylight, as not to prohibit any development coming forward at Unit 11 next door. And a similar layout at second floor level for that commercial. This is the first of the 2 recessive floor plates for residential use. So you can see the setback from the front here. This seeks to reduce the high-level bulk and respond to the requirements of the design code. On this level, we have 3 2-beds with private amenity space and 1 1-bed. At 4th floor, we have 2 2-beds and 2 1-beds. So that totals 8 homes. As set out in the report at paragraphs 6.9 onwards, we explained the need for new homes in the borough and London-wide, and that a presumption in favour of sustainable development does apply in this case, in our opinion, and that relates to paragraph 11D of the MPPF. So we're outside, albeit adjacent to a conservation area, and officers identify no adverse impacts and no clear reason for refusing. So turning to the roof plan, on this it's helpful to see the solar panels and some air source heat pump equipment that relates to a site-wide network. The approach has been with a whole life carbon and circular economy principles being followed, and that has influenced the design that's come forward. Here's the proposed front elevation. So the overall height is proposed at 5 stories, with these 2 at the top set back. The maximum height it reaches is 17.985 metres, so that's at its highest point here. So the design code for Latimer Industrial Estate is relevant here. So this is an adopted SPD from October 2021. And the guidance was put forward to shape the future development of that industrial estate. At paragraph 3.2, it says that development should be no taller than A, 3 stories with a setback 4th story. And that's the preferred approach, so that's what it says within the code. Or 4 stories with a setback 5th. And that is only allowed where there's an acceptable relationship with the neighbours in terms of daylight and sunlight. So the building here, we have the 3-storey height to the front with the setback 4th and 5th. And that parapet datum kind of reflects the residential opposite on the eastern side of Latimer Road. Just turning to the rear elevation, thought it'd be helpful to point out the materials proposed, predominantly brick and precast coloured concrete framing. We do have conditions to secure final details, which is important given how close to the conservation area this building would be. The contemporary style, in our opinion, adds to the visual interest of the street, and it's acceptable given the mixed character. There's no single strong character within it, and we think the views in and out of the conservation area would be protected. There's the proposed south elevation, and a section drawing just showing those recessive upper levels and the relationship to the embankment behind. I think this cross-section is really helpful because it shows you the relationships to neighbours, and this helps understand the impact on living conditions, which is critical. So it's critical in not only the local plan and the London plan, but also within the design code. So with regard to daylight and sunlight, there's opposite properties. 31 windows were assessed as part of the BRE study that was done, and we had full compliance with the BRE. So there was no material or harmful loss of sunlight or daylight identified. In terms of sense of enclosure, the 21-metre distance, and as well as that setback of the upper stories, is considered to be acceptable, and also that links to privacy. We have received an objection from Hammersmith and Fulham, but given the 50-metre distance, we have no concerns with regard to the amenity of those behind. Here's a visualisation that I think helpfully shows the articulation of the building, the kind of material palette that's proposed to be used. Another visualisation from a different viewpoint. And this one of it within context. I think this is helpful because it shows you those sites either side that would be undeveloped at this time. And that's the final image. I just thought it'd be helpful at this point to touch on transport and highways, which is addressed in the report, but subject to Section 106 contributions being secured and relevant conditions, we've concluded that it's policy compliant. And sorry, I just skipped past this one. This is the building heights appraisal that was submitted with the application, showing the variety of different building heights around. This has been helpful, but we've placed greater weight on the design code when actually considering whether the height is appropriate and the impact on the living conditions of near neighbours. But it just identifies that there is a mix of stories, with the highest being identified in green here and here. Turning to, this is just a summary table of the proposal showing what is being delivered. And then importantly, what members need to consider tonight within the planning balance. So we do have an uplift of 640 square metres of Class E floor space in the employment zone, 8 new residential units with that presumption in the MPPF applying. We've got, in terms of design and heritage, the site is outside of a conservation area but adjacent to, and we believe the well-articulated bulk is successful on the site, subject to details of materials being secured. Living conditions is another key issue, and we have, given the separation distances and the BRE compliance confirmed, we have no concerns with living conditions. The approach has been a whole life carbon and circular economy principles being applied to the site in terms of sustainability, and there's no objection with regard to fire safety D5 and D12. And again, subject to conditions and a legal agreement, no concerns with regard to transport and highways from officers. So, officer's opinion is the application should be approved, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Very good, thank you. Now we have speakers for this case. So first of all, the objectors, and I think Councillor Dent-Code, I think Emma, you'd like to go first. So please go ahead, and then I have a list going down. Miss MacDonald, Miss Campbell, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Murphy, and then Ms. Mayer. Is that the order in which you understand people would like to speak? Okay, very good. And in total, you've got 6 minutes. So, Emma, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to remind the committee of my long career as design and architectural critic and researcher, and 16 years on this committee, speaking tonight as ward councillor. The breaches of the various policies are clear. Local Plan 2019 CL1 states applications must respect the existing context, character and appearance of the neighbourhood, improve the quality and character of the buildings, and CL2 demands the highest architectural urban design quality. The design code demands heights of no more than 14.3, while the application is a massive 18 metres. It states there should be no adverse effect on neighbouring properties and should ensure a strong rhythmic street composition. The proposed roofline has no rhythm. Unit 10 does not meet any of these criteria. We have 600 empty offices across the borough. We have no need for more run-of-the-mill commercial offices. We need instead to build on the local creative workspaces that have emerged organically and are welcome in Latimer Road. Personally, I find the proposal outsized and the design weird. The two elements, commercial and residential, do not complement each other but appear compromised and unwieldy. The front facade is poorly resolved, odd, and the rear is a brick monolith facing Inham Road. Savills tell us the height is supported, but the sole supportive letter which mentions height is from Unit 11, whose own application was refused by the committee and refused by the Secretary of State due to design issues, so you can draw your own conclusions on that. A majority of Latimer Road residents wish to update the design code with reference to their vision statement you may have seen and the climate emergency. Residents aren't refusing development. They want to be part of the process, working for positive change. This application is against everything they stand for and indeed would fight for in Latimer Road. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Residents of Latimer Road, including myself, support reasonable development, but this application has had a gigantic local campaign against it. 91 objections from local residents because the building is so extraordinarily incongruent and will tower like a skyscraper over the Victorian houses in a conservation area with extraordinarily disproportionate height and massing in total contradiction to the planning officer's statement. The living conditions of hundreds will be adversely affected. I live and work opposite the proposed development. My basement was already very dark. It will lose most of its light. My bedroom will be directly overlooked by the flats, and I will have a towering wall blocking both my windows instead of open sky. And my office will lose much of its beautiful open light, ruining my living conditions. There will be zero local benefit from this building, and the street already has 20 often new and high quality unlet offices. There is clearly no demand for any more, and it contravenes the council's own planning guidelines on height, massing, design and privacy.
I've come here just to show my dismay that this could ever have got to this point. I live opposite in Latimer Road. I bought 2 years ago. I intend to be there for a long time to come. And the idea that a 5-storey building, which obviously will take time to develop, will be the beginning of possibly everybody else putting their buildings that high. On the diagram that's on what came out in our email, there's two concrete sort of like pretend blocks either side, which is not as I see on your design there. But is that suggesting this is the beginning of the end for us? My bedroom is on the ground floor and the sunlight comes in every afternoon that the sun is there. This goes right the way through my flat and into the garden, which doesn't get sunlight after a certain time of day. I don't want to lose my sunlight, I don't want to lose the daylight, and I don't want to lose the feeling of spaciousness and a community in our street.
So I'm Henry Peterson. I chair the Neighbourhood Forum, which produced the Neighbourhood Plan. This single street's covered by more planning policies than probably any other in the borough. There's the local plan, and in its new version, a specific site allocation for additional housing. There's the adopted neighbourhood plan with a set of 5 policies for the street, including one on building heights. The council's first design code applies to this part of the street, and one side of the street is an employment zone and the other side a conservation area, an unusual scenario. Generally, a local plan policy would carry more weight than one in a neighbourhood plan, but if there is conflict between the two, NPPF paragraph 30 says that the neighbourhood plan policy takes precedence, and both carry more weight than an SPD such as the design code. The position of the Forum has always been that the proposals are one floor too high, taking account of the site's position in the street. To the south, views of the western skyline have been blocked ever since Imperial College built its Wood Lane development from 2010 onwards. Redevelopment of Unit 1, which was shown to you, was granted planning consent at 13.8 metres overall height, increased by half a metre via a variation. The Unit 10 proposals are a fraction under 18 metres, as Councillor Dent-Code has mentioned, and we too are not convinced that commercial floor space will be taken up at this location. If the application were further south, nearer the Imperial buildings, the Forum might take a different view. But we believe a refusal could be well defended on appeal on the basis of neighbourhood plan policies coupled with the design code. Thank you.
Now, we've more or less run out of time, but I would like the 2 remaining registered speakers to, perhaps if you can add a sentence or 2, if you wish, to what's already been said.
Hi, I'm Martin. I'm representing a totally different neighbourhood, Inham Road, across the railway line, representing 100 households along Inham Road, west of this proposal. We have written many objections, and we don't consider our concerns have been taken or heard. Inham is a residential community, 2-storey high buildings. Martin, the microphone. Okay, sorry you didn't hear that, pardon me. Shall I start again? Okay, so I represent 100 or so households along Inham Road west of this proposal, and we have written in objections, but we don't think we've been heard or taken note of. Inham is a residential community. All our properties are 2-storey, making them about 6 metres high. The proposal is for 5 stories, but in earnest 6 stories with the plant on top at 18 metres high. That's 3 metres higher than Inham Road. And I'm showing this because this is the architect's drawing, and I'm highlighting the building, which is now showing the exact nature of what's going on. The proposal will overlook our habitable rooms and gardens. There will be a loss of privacy. There will be nuisance and noise from overlooking balconies, as the planner described earlier. The rear west facade is 5 unbroken stories, 18 metres by 30 metres of brickwork.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Sorry,
I'm representing a whole different neighbourhood that you haven't heard yet.
You've gone way over time.
May I finish on one last point?
I would like
one last
give
point.
Mrs. Mayor an opportunity if she'd like to say anything. Otherwise, you've used all her time. So.
Network Rail have asked this building to be 3 metres from the boundary. It's 2 metres. On that measurement alone, the planning should be refused. So I request that the council refuse this application tonight. Thank you very much.
So to then I finish, I'm the acting chair of the Latimer Road Preservation Group, and I have a property in Aynham Road which will have the same problems as the other 100 residents. You got 100 objections for this building, which should show you that there is no love for this proposal, and once it's established, it will ruin the whole area. Our gardens won't get direct sunlight anymore, and it's just unnecessary. And once you set the precedent, you will have to live with it.
That's understood. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right. Can you put your microphone off, please? Okay, so thank you very much. Now, there will be questions, I'm sure, to the speakers. Can I now invite the applicant team? Now, obviously, gone a long way over time, so you'll have a similar time if you need it. But please, who's going to go first? Mrs. Patel, is that right?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Samriti Patel and I am from Savills Planning. I am the planning agent for this planning application. I'll keep my presentation short as officers have done an excellent job in explaining why planning permission should be granted in their report and presentation. As existing, the site comprises a warehouse building of poor architectural quality, which does not contribute positively to the character of the area or the adjacent conservation area. The site falls within an employment zone and is allocated for mixed-use redevelopment within the neighbourhood plan. The principle of intensifying the commercial floor space and introducing a residential use on the upper floors through a mixed-use development is fully backed by planning policy. Significant effort has been put into the proposed scheme that is before members. Work commenced on developing the proposals in 2019 and a planning application was submitted in 2020. At the time, the applicant was advised to withdraw the application to allow the production of the Latimer Road Design Code, which was then published in 2021. Since this time, the applicant has worked further to work with planning officers, attending 3 pre-application meetings with council officers. They've also engaged with the local community via flyers, a webinar, public exhibition and website, and undertaken political engagement. The feedback received from this process has also been considered in the design evolution process. Revisions made to the design since the original proposals include a reduced massing from the withdrawn 6-storey scheme to a Part 3, Part 5-storey development, simplification of the overall design approach, including amendments to the roof form and elevation design to break down the massing and to respond to the local context and conservation area, providing more visual interest to the rear elevation and setting terraces back to prevent overlooking. The resulting proposal is of the highest quality and has the full support of the Council's planning and design officers. It will be an attractive addition to the street. It will activate the western side of Latimer Road and will enhance visual amenity whilst preserving the character and appearance of the conservation area. As confirmed by officers, the proposal fully complies with the design code. The design code adopts a tripartite design and includes 3.5 metre setbacks to the top floors. The massing approach is also fully backed by robust daylight and sunlight testing, which confirms full BRE compliance, demonstrating no unacceptable harm to neighbours in terms of daylight and sunlighting. Neighbouring amenity is further preserved by providing good separation distances. This includes over 21 metres to the properties opposite on Latimer Road and over 50 metres to the houses across the railway in Hammersmith and Fulham. This is in excess of the local plan policy requirement of 18 metres. The proposals also set back the top floors and sculpt and articulate the built form to ensure no harmful privacy, outlook or sense of enclosure impacts. The design process has also taken into account the reasons given by the Planning Inspectorate in refusing the scheme at Unit 11. In this regard, it is noted that the proposal at Unit 10 adopts a very different design approach. The proposal is for 3 stories fronting Latimer Road, with the parapet height positively responding to the height of the existing properties opposite. The 4th and 5th stories are meaningfully set back. In comparison, the Unit 11 proposal was for 4 stories with a more limited 5th story setback. Also, as noted, the proposal at Unit 10 successfully adopts the design code principles to sculpt, articulate and break down the massing to create an attractive design which will improve visual amenity and will ensure no harmful amenity impacts. In contrast, the Unit 11 scheme was refused because of its design approach in terms of vertical emphasis, commercial character, and use of inappropriate materials. Overall, as confirmed by officers, the proposal is policy compliant and it will deliver social, economic and environmental benefits in accordance with the policy objectives of the neighbourhood plan, which will include a significant uplift in the quantum and quality of the commercial floor space, providing modern, flexible space which will support a range of uses, including creative and commercial workspaces, resulting in local economic benefits. This is supported by the adopted and new local plan. 8 new homes helping to meet the borough's housing targets, and a high-quality, respectful design which will create an attractive development fully compliant with the design code, providing active frontages, increased natural surveillance, and a proposal which will greatly improve the quality of the street scene. The proposal will also deliver a sustainable development with 100% biodiversity net gain, an urban greening factor of 0.329, exceeding the 0.3 policy target, and the use of air source heat pumps and solar panels to reduce carbon emissions. All of this is in accordance with the Council's own Greening SPD. To conclude, we respectfully ask that members endorse the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. I have members of the project team here with me and would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, colleagues, our chance to ask questions of either side. Who'd like to go first? Who wants to lead off?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. I would like just clarification from our officer first, if you don't mind, Chair.
We'll come to that later.
We'll come to that later. Okay. I will then to the to the objectors. With regard to the, if you can just elaborate the issue with Network Rail, because that's raised alarm to myself because there is not enough information as far as I'm concerned. So I would like to see more elaboration on that, please. Thank you, Chair.
I followed up the consultation with Network Rail as it appears on the website, and I spoke to the lady who answered the consultation. She confirmed to me that the railway line is electrified. I live beside it, so I know it is electrified. When a railway line is electrified, any proposal adjacent to the railway line must be 3 meters away. In this case, the application has the proposal 2 meters from the boundary line. And I think that's fairly crucial to the application. And on that grounds alone, I would think the members should refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I could add to that, there's also an element where the nuclear trains use the line, so those guys should be consulted as well. Obviously, the danger of nuclear transportation up and down that line is a factor to the boundary and any proposal there too, and I didn't see a nuclear consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Question to objectors, perhaps Mr. Peterson, but if anyone else would like to answer it, that's fine as well. Specifically about the neighbourhood plan, Mr. Peterson, you said that this is in contravention of the neighbourhood plan. In our papers, it doesn't quote directly from the neighbourhood plan, but talks more generally and doesn't say that it would be in contravention. So could you go into more detail about why you believe it contravenes the neighbourhood plan, please?
Thank you. Neighbourhood plan includes 5 policies specific to Latimer Road. LR5 requires applications to consider the heights of nearby buildings, which range from 4-storey at the southern end to 2-storey at the northern end, and taking account of building heights in LBHF. So, in the first version of the neighbourhood plan, we considered a height limit of 14 metres, that being the tallest in the street on the western side at the moment. We were advised by officers that was going to be over-specific when it came to examination of the neighbourhood plan. So this form of words is designed to ensure that new buildings respect their neighbours, so that if they are at the southern end, where there are office buildings of 3.5 stories, and which back onto the Imperial site, which ranges from 10 to 35 stories, height is far less of an issue because everybody on the eastern side of the street has already lost their views, their evening sunlight and so forth. But then if you move northwards towards the 2-storey terraced housing, you would expect heights to drop. That's right, would range from 4 stories to 2 stories at the northern end. This site is nearer the northern end than the southern end, which is why I mentioned that were it opposite the Imperial buildings, it would be less of an issue for everybody in terms of building heights.
Thank you very much, and I'll ask much the same question to the applicants, sort of chance to respond to that, given what Mr. Peterson has said. Why do you not believe it's in contravention with the neighbourhood plan? Any more detail on that would be welcome. Thank you.
Dealing specifically with that point, I think the policy itself doesn't set a limit on the height. From our perspective, it refers and relies upon extra guidance being prepared through the design code, which does allow for up to 5 stories, obviously, where there is evidence to support that. And in this case, we have provided robust daylight and sunlight testing, which does confirm that there is no unacceptable impacts on the neighbours in both respects, both in terms of daylight and sunlight.
Thank you.
Thank you. To the objectors, please. The houses opposite at the moment get quite a view over and through that building. Could you just, this is quite a large building, that's my concern on this, it's quite a large building. What, in terms of, we've seen the impact of the view of that, the Imperial College building at the end of Oxford Gardens that just completely blocks that. Could you just outline a little bit about how you see the impact of that building right in front of you, please?
Absolutely. So there are hundreds of people in the street. I live directly opposite Unit 10, and I have basically a 2-storey low-lying unit in front of me, one of the 14, and that will be replaced by a towering block, skyscraper-sized. I mean, it's ginormous. And so I will literally lose pretty much all my light, all my sunlight in my upper floors, and my basement, which is already extremely dark, will then be kind of unlivable, and that's my kitchen and living room, and that is replicated up and down the road. So it will really make my life unlivable. It really will be deeply unpleasant to just face basically a brick wall. The argument is that the road is quite wide, but it's really not that wide. So at the moment I look over beautiful sunsets, which everybody in the street treasures, and that will be replaced, and open sky, and that will be replaced by just a brick wall, basically, with people looking directly into my bedroom as I kind of go about my business. It's the most awful thing that's happened to the street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on the sunlight point to objectors. So we were told in the presentation in our papers that it meets all the BRE guidelines. So, I mean, on the face of it, my feeling would be if we were to reject planning on base of sunlight, on appeal, that would be overturned because the inspector would say it meets all the BRE guidelines, you can't turn it down on that basis, there is no basis. Is there any more information you'd like to raise on that, which I can then raise with either the applicants or with officers afterwards?
So we will, for one thing, I don't know that the developers took on board the basements, and I don't believe they measured the basements. I believe they measured the ground floor upwards. And secondly, winter sunlight levels are far lower, and so our living conditions completely in contraversion to what the planning officer said will be dramatically affected, as will others all round. The massing, the sense of enclosure, the privacy, all things that are directly called for in your own council's guidelines will be contravened. I do not see how you can possibly allow this to go through. Thank you.
May I add from Inham Road residents, I don't think, I know that no sunlight or daylight or BRE studies were made towards the Inham Road properties on the western side of the application, and we would be affected to somewhat the same extent as Latimer Road. Thank you.
Well, thank you both, and we'll raise the point of sunlight later with officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Question to the objectors. I know, Mr. Peterson, you did raise about the height. I mean, do you think the 15 meters is acceptable as opposed to the 17 over 17? And in terms of the sunlight impact that you might face, what sort of difference would it make if it's a 50 meter or a 70 meter height? Thank you. 18, sorry, 17.85, 18.
I mean, I'm not going to comment on the sunlight calculations. That's a highly technical matter, and I think a lot of people in this borough live in conditions which do not meet BRE standards because it is a very densely built borough. In terms of the policy in the plan, I think the neighbourhood policy is clear that new development should respect its neighbours, and it refers specifically to 4 stories at the southern end and 2 stories at the northern end. And it was on that basis that we entered into discussions with the council on the design code, and we, along with residents in Latimer Road, were alarmed that the design code became steadily more flexible on building height as matters proceeded. And I think in the initial pre-application advice on this application, that was negative in terms of building heights, but it was later replaced by a further version that said it was just about acceptable in terms of the design code. As I mentioned, the design code is an SPD. The neighbourhood plan, policies in that have statutory force and more weight than in an SPD. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your answer. May I have an answer from the applicant whether you had any discussions with the residents about the height, and was that in agreement with the officers that this height is acceptable? I know I heard in your speech that it's completely in sync with the design code and the height, but just to elaborate on that question, thank you.
Sorry. Yes, we did carry out consultation, and we did receive some concern from residents around the height. We did have
please,
a resident from Inham Road present at the exhibition. Sorry.
Bear with me a second. You mustn't interrupt other speakers. No one suddenly intervened, say when Mr. Peterson was speaking. Nobody suddenly jumped up and began shouting then. So we must allow everyone to speak properly. So please go ahead when you continue your remark.
Sorry, yeah, so on height, we had a lot of discussions with officers before we were involved in 2019-2020. The scheme started off as 6 stories. Obviously, then through the withdrawal of the application, the production of the design code, further work was done. And the design code does suggest you could have up to 5 stories. It says you could have 4 stories with a setback 5th story. And the work that we've done with the architects is looking at what would be a more respectful design, which does consider the neighbouring buildings and the heights. And we have actually reduced that down so that the frontage is only 3 stories high. And then there's a setback, and that's where the 5th story element is put in. So we feel that that does respond to the context, and that additional drop in height from the 4 to 5, the 4 to the 3 on the frontage also has a big impact in terms of mitigating any harm from a sense of enclosure perspective. So I think we've done a lot of work on that, and I don't know if Shara, you want to come in on the height. Shara's the architect, so he'll speak a little bit more around the height.
Hello, yes, thanks for that. Yes, I mean, we have had quite a lot of consultation with the planners, and we have also followed the design code, which was established not long ago, and we were also part of the team of people listening in relation to the creation of a design code. And the building is actually 21.6 meters there's a distance between the proposed design of facade of our building, the 3-story high, and the opposite side. And there's another 3.5 meters setback of the residential. So that's overall, the residential comes to around nearly 25, but actually just over 25 meters away. So there's no privacy issue as far as the council is concerned in relation to the regulations, because it's 18 meters. We've got on the first three floors 21, and then it goes to 25 meters. And the setback really does allow for the street to be read, at that part of the street to be read as 3-story, and it's similar to the opposite side 3-story building. So we feel this actually would help. I think to some extent it would repair a street which has been kind of demolished by the creation of these industrial units and really needs to have a life of its own back. Both it gives commercial space, it gets a safer space for people to walk around, they would have more residential.
Okay.
So overall the height, I think it relates to that.
Sorry, you can't make a speech, you have to answer our questions. Colleagues, any further questions? Gerard, and then last question, Marwan.
Just really to pick up on that business about the design. I mean, this building in this position, I mean, in another position in the borough, technically very sound, very eco-friendly, but it is a massive building in this particular road that looks like nothing else around it. So just in terms of the design and respecting the neighbourhood, yes, it's stepped back, but that still doesn't stop the height being there. Yes, that height may be stepped back, but you're still looking out at this. So could you just elaborate a bit more on how you feel it fits in with the rest of the neighbourhood in terms of the design, please?
I don't know whether it's possible to see those 3Ds again, because that actually the street visualization of our building it shows what you will see when you are in the street. Well, actually you have to, yes, absolutely, but you have to have your head up in order to see the whole lot. We have done another one which shows, no, when you draw actually it's not very funny, because when you look at the building, you have a view. The view that you see, yes, you go up. If you get your head right up, you will see more. I'm sorry,
Please,
may I finish that?
Don't interrupt speakers, please.
And the point is that, yes, you will see it if you look up, but when you are in the street, you are much more aware of the 3-story building, which is similar to the opposite side. So therefore, it really relates to the street. I don't think it's going to be working against the street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marwan,
Thank you, Chair. I'm still unclear on the network rail regarding the comments here, the proposed works, including so on. If I refer back to that table, and then the assurance in the drawing that's been submitted, it's confirming from the back 2 meters away. Can you show us this? Where does it fit in the drawing, please? Because you said the drawing is showing. So if you can just share it with us. So I want to be assured that this is really achievable within the drawing elevation, especially in the back of that massive frontier.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. Have we moved away now from questions to...
No, we haven't. I think, Marwan, if you could just help help Mrs. Ray with the image that you'd like to put up, and then
here is said
put a question to
in your table
the objectors and the
on page 24
applicant
in the table, network rail section. Yeah. It's the here. It's the submitted drawings clearly indicate the new building will be 2 meters from Network Rail land in line with their requirements.
I think that's something we need to pursue in a moment or two with officers, actually.
Okay,
Because
so
there's
that's
an issue, because there's an important issue, as you raise, of the rear of the building to the Network Rail land, and obviously the railway itself.
But this is
if you can raise that in a minute or two, I think that's probably right.
But this is addressed to the project manager, Mr. Chairman, to the planning. Okay, fine. If we can do that.
It's really addressed to
the officer.
To officers.
Okay.
Tom, did you have a last question?
I have one comment quickly to the planner, to the planning applicant, just quickly on the...
To the applicant, yes, but
yes.
It needs to be a brief question.
Very brief, yeah, because
okay,
it's regarding the social community benefits in addressing the overall objections from the whole street. I mean, this entity as a workspace, it's within that community. It's not going to be transported in absence to the whole community. So how did you really address that to feel confident that it's really bringing social benefit to the community? Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's why I stopped there.
I think the social benefits of the proposal are around the uplift in commercial floor space and also the activity that the proposal will bring. So from a commercial floor space perspective, the proposal will nearly double the amount of commercial floor space. It's also proposed as a flexible Class E use, so it can respond to the demand of the market. It could be shops, it could be offices, it could be workspaces, and it's been designed in a way that the space can be divided as well, so it's flexible. And I think that activity that will be brought to the site and the area will be a significant positive benefit of the scheme. And then, of course, there's housing in terms of housing need and the borough's requirements for new homes. In particular, the proposal provides 8 homes in a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, which is in line with the neighbourhood plan, which talks about homes for downsizers and young people.
Last question.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is to the applicants on greening, and we read in our papers that the urban greening factor will be slightly short of the desired amount, but is acceptable given the use of the land and the space available. But in the CGI, and I know it's just a CGI, what looks like the addition of greening is just sort of some flower beds with some wispy grass. Is there not an opportunity to add some trees here? Is that something you've considered, and is that something you'd be willing to add?
I think the idea of additional greening would be good. I think the report on that note wasn't quite right. I think there were some figures were not quite right, so we are actually improving. Do you want to explain that? Then I explain about the tree.
Yeah, so on the actual target that's required, for predominantly commercial sites, the target is 0.3, and we've had some further correspondence with officers on that today, and our proposal achieves 0.329, so it exceeds it. And that's achieved through green roof, extensive green roofs across all of the roof, other than where we've got plant or air source heat pump equipment. We've also got planting on the ground level along the public realm where there are some planting beds. Shara, if you want to come in around trees.
On top of the commercial space, we have got quite a good depth of where we could put soil and we could have more planting there. So it would not be just kind of a few bits of grass and things. So that would certainly add, and it could be quite a bit of additional greenery. In relation to adding trees, I would be very much for it. In fact, I wondered at some point whether we could work with the council, because the pavement is relatively wide, whether we could work and start producing. I'm sorry if I'm saying something very funny, but I thought it could actually be quite helpful to add additional trees to the street.
Thank you.
Sorry?
Just very lastly, following on from Councillor Bennett's point there, if we were to go there, do I understand that you would be entirely happy were we to say, instead of those planters on the pavement outside the proposed building, that there might simply be more street trees? Is that something that you would be happy with, were we to go there?
Yeah, I think that's something we can consider. There is an existing street tree right in front of the site, which we're keeping, and I think we need to be mindful of there is a number of entrances to the commercial space, so the planters were located in a way to, navigate pedestrians in, but if we can work with officers on that and it's feasible, I think that's something we would consider.
One more point, there is at the very end of our site where we have shown some planting again, that's an area where I think we could add some trees.
Well, thank you very much indeed, everyone, for answering our questions. We now move on within the way these meetings are structured. It's an opportunity for members of the committee to ask officers questions. Actually, Marwan, if you don't mind, I'd like to lead off with a couple of questions that I have. The first is, I'd like to clarify exactly the kind of hierarchy of the various plans and policies that we have to consider. We have, first of all, we have the design code, which is an SPD, and although it's quite modern, that is in a category that's actually below the development plan, as I understand it. There's also an issue about the new local plan. Now, obviously, having a new local plan takes a very long time to achieve. I believe, although we may be close to the final consultation, is it, and maybe this is a semi-legal point, am I right in thinking that that is still not something to be given very much weight? Because the reason I ask is that I know there are a lot of people, and in fact a lot of people for several years, have felt that the existing development plan, which tends to support further office development, they felt this is not really something that's kind of caught up with the real world. Can we address that issue? Yeah, so perhaps if officers can comment on those, if you can comment on those 2 points first.
Yes, that's really helpful. So you're absolutely right. The design code is an SPD, so it is, we would give more weight to the neighbourhood plan. So Mr. Peterson is correct with that, specifically policies LR1 to LR5, which relate to Latimer Road. So that's definitely right. With regard to the new local plan review, so we've covered it in sections 5.2 and 5.3 of the officer report. So the starting point still remains the policies in the local plan 2019. So we are still attaching it. It is a material consideration, but we're still as officers consistently affording limited weight. So you would have seen other things we're taking to committee. We're still giving the limited weight at this stage. One to watch, because that's going to change imminently, but that's our position now. So with regard to that, the sort of highest policy plan we've afforded weight to would be the MPPF, hence why I was speaking about paragraph 11D to members when going through my presentation. But yeah, absolutely right, Chairman.
Thank you. And the next couple of questions I wanted to raise were relating to daylight and sunlight. and it seems as though the separation of the buildings is such that we are satisfied that although there hasn't been a detailed daylight sunlight report, in effect it's not required because the separation is sufficiently great. That's my first question. And the second relates to kind of views. And I mean, generally speaking in planning, my understanding is there is no right to a view. However, the neighbourhood plan and the conservation area quite correctly make reference to the situation where if you lived on the other side of the Latimer Road from the side, you have a lovely vista to the west, and I'm sure, you know, in certain circumstances, watching the setting sun in the west, I'm sure is extremely attractive if you lived along quite a large section of the road. How do those things fit in policy terms?
Yeah, that's a great question. We would say with this application, the daylight and sunlight report would be required. So the design code that follows from the neighbourhood plan and other things says about if something's reaching 5 stories, we need a daylight and sunlight assessment with the application to categorically show there will be no harmful or material loss of daylight and sunlight. It might be helpful at this point, sorry, just to divert slightly and answer the question that was being spoken about the basement light well and the light to that, because the information we have of the 31 windows that were tested directly opposite. So the worst window that still complies with the BRE reduction, but the worst window affected is at number 282 and shown on the daylight and sunlight as window number 6, and it's an upper ground floor window. The lower ground window was also tested, but it wasn't as bad a loss, if you see what I mean, even though that loss was still acceptable. So there's no figures within that daylight and sunlight assessment that concern officers in terms of the BRE guide and how we apply it. So that's kind of links back to we needed that information. It was required for us to be satisfied a 5th story was okay. And answering your second point, I think that's again valid. Views across and out must be attractive, but we can't protect a view in planning. That's not something we can do. The key considerations would be a sense of enclosure and any potential loss of outlook. And that's more as you feel from inside a room. So when you're standing in the centre point of a room, you know, how does that affect your space? So quite often things will be before members that would come out very close to someone, but actually, unless you're leaning out the window and looking, you wouldn't appreciate that. Now with this, there would definitely be a change. So people will stand at that window and they will see now at least the 3-story element directly in front of them, but that relates to the scale on the other side. The 5 stories, the 2 additional stories, we believe that setback and that break in the form is acceptable and would ensure there's no harmful loss of outlook or sense of enclosure at 21 metres away.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, taken up quite a lot of time there. Marwan, you wanted to ask this issue about Network Rail and their land. Perhaps we can ask that about
Okay, thank you, Chair. It is in the informative 6, yeah? I just want to have a clear clarification there, especially in the elevation behind this front building. I'm still uncomfortable with that background elevation, so if you can take us through that, please. Because here, I mean, quite a list of Network Rail being addressed, electrification, line, future work. So please, can you elaborate on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Network Rail were consulted on the application and responded. They said that buildings are required to be situated at least 2 metres or 3 metres for overhead lines and third rail. So it doesn't specify about the electrification, but there's no overhead lines here that would be affected. Because as well, it's also relevant that the existing building is set 1.6 metres from that boundary. So it's actually closer at the moment than the proposed building, and the proposed building is being set 2 metres away. Irrespective of all of that, whether there's a concern as to Network Rail's, objection and so on, they are a landowner, so there's a separate process for them as adjacent landowners that may need to be dealt with regard to future maintenance, which is where the key objection about 2 metres seems to come from, reviewing their objection again, or their comments again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. On the informative 5 regarding the water from the risk involved there, and there is one line I just want: the proposed development is located within 15 meters of Thames Water's underground assets. As such, the development could cause the assets to fail if appropriate measures are not taken. What they are alluding there?
This is, Network Rail as landowners, across the UK, would want some degree of protection next to their assets. So it's basically saying you've got a development that's in close proximity to our boundary. Speak to us, make sure it's okay, make sure it's not going to harm, ongoing maintenance and so on. We could update that informative to make that clear, or tweak the wording if members were so minded. But any kind of, I'm sure the conversations will continue if permission were to be granted between Network Rail and the applicant.
The Thames Water.
Yeah, so Thames Water's, oh, apologies, sorry. Thames Water is the same. I'm so sorry.
The same.
I said, yeah. So as a landowner, they have interest within the site, and that's a very common informative that we would attach, but we can update it. I'm sorry I referred to Network Rail.
Yeah. That's why
Still
I thought you were mentioning, alluding to
Thank
the
you.
updating that, to clarify that statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Gerard and then Tom.
Thank you. Can you go back to the slide that you put on that showed the taller buildings to the... I just want to see where they're at the southern end, aren't they, nearer to the flyover?
Would it be helpful to see those aerial images at the beginning of the presentation?
Yes, yeah. So I know it was a street. Didn't you have it looking down the street, looking at the taller buildings?
Yeah, down the street would be this one.
Yeah. So the taller commercial buildings are to the much more to the south, aren't they? Where there are other commercial buildings opposite, and you go then underneath the flyover. So the buildings at this end are the end where this building is, are the lower buildings, aren't they? Right.
So through you, Chairman, within the industrial estate, this is the only building that's been redeveloped, which is number 1, and that's to the south. And then to the north, I'll just show, probably this image is best. They're all these lower scale utilitarian buildings as existing. None have been redeveloped yet or approved at this stage.
So this building proposed would sit in the middle of those low-rise buildings?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Until any others came forward as part of that.
Thank you, Chairman. Two related questions. So the first one is, could we see I think there's a side-on image. Basically what I wanted to understand is with the setback, if you were on the ground floor or standing on the pavement on the far side of the road, how much of the 5-storey part of the building would you see?
So it's probably best to compare
So
to...
I want to see how much of a difference the setback makes.
This visual shows it from sort of eye level, street level, if you see what I mean. But if you were to look up, if you tilted your head up, you would see the 4th and 5th stories. And I think it would be from further down south, very obvious at the moment, because these other ones haven't been redeveloped yet. So you can see actually in that view the flank of number 1. So if I go to a site photo.
Could you just go back to the the black and white diagram, that one? Yeah. Okay, so that gives you, so the 5th story, even standing directly opposite, would be visible, but you're saying this setback still it's visible, but it has, the setback has an impact.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, the fifth story would be visible, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially from windows opposite, they would be able to see it. But in terms of the actual outlook and sense of enclosure, the recessed setback helps alleviate that bulk.
Yeah. Okay, and related to it, and I appreciate this is a qualitative, not a quantitative question, but going to Mr. Peterson's point about the local plan, an LR5 saying it has to sort of, I can't remember the exact word, but relate to or respect the buildings, going from 2 stories in the north to 4 stories in the south. And we've obviously, there's been a rejected appeal for, a rejected planning application for 6 stories. This one's now 5 stories, albeit with 2 of them set back. Can you just talk us through the thinking, why the 6 stories was unacceptable, why the 5 stories, 2 of which are set back, is acceptable in relation to what Mr. Peterson said?
Yeah, I think Mr. Peterson makes excellent points. So the Latimer Road policies within the neighbourhood plan do say all those things. In LR5, it talks about restoring the original urban form of the street to allow increased building heights on the western side, subject to, and then it goes into consideration of buildings that range and the things we've discussed and are included in the objection. Now, importantly for us, the 3-story element relates to that opposite the street. So that datum point, we believe, responds to those directly opposite. And that's quite successful in terms of how you read it in the street with those recessed stories. So that is directly relevant. We also then, the neighbourhood plan goes on to talk about the design code. So you need to give that more weight, but it talks about the actions that need to be taken, and the design code came from that. That has a maximum height set out for 4-story buildings, which is 14.3 metres. This isn't a 4-story building, so we've gone higher, up to just less than 18, again, set back. So looking at those 2 things together, we're comfortable with it. We've consulted our urban designer, and they're happy with that relationship as well. And then critically, we've applied in the planning balance the presumption in favour of sustainable development. So here we're delivering new commercial floor space in an employment zone and 8 new residential units. So even if we were, say, uncomfortable with the height, which we've actually concluded we're not, but even if we were, we would still see those as clear, significant benefits in our planning balance.
Thanks, Chairman. Officer, could you just list, I know there's a refusal in 2021 which has 5 floors set back as well. Could you just list out the major merits of this application that allowed you to approve, and just a few points for the benefit of the panel and the audience? Thank you.
That question's really helpful, thank you, because I didn't actually answer Councillor Bennett's other question about the appeal decision and the differences there, because that's actually, it's not, we've given more weight to the local plan, the neighbourhood plan and the design code, but it is a material consideration of relevance. It's relatively recent. So the appeal decision that was, just checking, it was 2021. Yes, 2021 that you referred to. It talks about the excessive height not responding to the buildings opposite. Now, I actually thought this may come up, so I've just included the image on the screen of what was refused. So the inspector talked about metal claddings and stone and the dominant materials that are in the local vernacular. And so we think this has gone a far better architectural route. It's still contemporary, but it picks up on the materials that we have nearby, breaks down the bulk much more successfully. So we've weighed that into the planning balance, as I said, as a material consideration, but they did conclude on this one that the 4 stories, the sheer 4 stories, was unacceptable. Here we have a 3 stories with the 2 set back. So hopefully that answers that question.
Forgot another one. In terms of the privacy issues that were raised by the objectors, I don't see any advisory informative on that one, but does it satisfy the privacy issues raised by the residents, or is there a satisfactory report or any sort of assessment done for that one? Thank you.
Yes, that's a key issue. It's covered in 6.32 of the report, so it's overlooking and privacy. Probably would have been better worded as loss of privacy to make that clear. But we've concluded there wouldn't be any, so there's 21 metres between direct-facing windows, and we're very comfortable with that distance. Again, just feeding into the appeal decision that was made, there was no concerns with that with regard to privacy, if you want that as a material consideration too.
Marwan, did you have a further question? Tom,
Yeah.
finally.
Yes, thank you very much. It's really quite extensive work done there, especially try to address the different stakeholders. I'm trying to work out the objection from the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, try to understand their concern, and especially in the statement, I try to go back to different section to draw some conclusion. If you can just give it to me in a nutshell, their main concern regarding this development from all angles.
I think the key concerns they raised were the impact on living conditions of people over the railway line in their borough, and the concerns about the height and massing and it being dominant. And then they have raised concerns with the safety of the train lines and network, but I'm not sure why they've raised that. But that's because that would be to do with land ownership. So it wouldn't be something they have to demonstrate in detail how that would be done at this early stage, particularly as the separation distance to that boundary will be increased.
So just for the record, Mr. Chair, just so that issue will be pursued further with the borough to seek clarification.
It's a land ownership issue that falls outside of planning. So it's not something that we would secure, or we don't deem necessary to secure as part of a condition. The buildings are separated. The building's getting further away from the boundary line than what's existing.
So there is no direct impact when this is completed?
Yeah, we don't believe there will be a direct impact, but there's other legislation, and it's a land ownership issue that would fall outside of planning. So Network Rail would be kind of covering their, they would be dealing with their own as a landowner adjacent to this property.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Last one.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the point of the trees, we discussed introducing more trees into this site. What would be if we were minded to do that, what would be the best way to incorporate that on condition, perhaps?
I think an additional landscaping condition would be entirely reasonable and could be quite successful.
Could you just give us some idea of the sort of thing it might say?
So, I mean, the architect identified that to the side, and I'll bring it up again, there is an area where the crossover is being reinstated, and I'm assuming that, they would explore opportunities in this location. Whether a tree could be feasibly delivered, I mean, this borough is committed to right tree, right place. But, it would be good to explore those options and increase any greenery to the front.
Okay, yeah. As long as, if we were to include that condition, I think there'd really need to be an emphasis on trees that provide a public benefit. So if it's sort of really tucked into the side, there's limited public benefit. So either working with the council to put it in the pavement or on the frontage so it's visible by everyone walking down that street.
I would just check this with you, Lorna, but it could be that you added a landscaping condition and we had delegated to officers to have a discussion about contributions towards street trees. That could be something that we've done previously. But if you think it's necessary to make the development acceptable.
I don't think extra trees in the street or somewhere else is actually necessary to make this development acceptable in planning terms, but we have in the past had a sort of a condition where the feasibility of providing trees in the street is explored, you know, because we don't know if it's feasible at the moment, you know, because obviously in the street you have to have so much passing room, there may not be any room for any trees. I mean, it's possible for there to be a condition to just explore the feasibility, or have a sort of some sort of landscaping plan, to just, you know, just to see whether that is something that is feasible, because at the moment we just don't know. I mean, ultimately, I don't think that is, you know, necessary to make this development acceptable in planning terms, and so it's a bit, you know, sort of borderline as to whether it meets the tests in the SIL regulations. I mean, it probably doesn't. But if you feel very strongly.
Yeah, it may be better to secure on-site greening and potentially trees through a landscaping condition that specifically refers to trees, not just shrubs and planting.
Yeah, but I think just maybe have an extra condition requiring a landscaping scheme, just to explore the possibility, you know, whether it is feasible for there to be additional trees in the street.
Yeah, I mean, I think
you feel that's
landscaping conditions are quite common, and I think the idea of landscaping condition includes exploration of extra street trees.
Can't guarantee anything.
Seems to me to be entirely reasonable. Yeah, if we were minded to go in that direction.
Just to explore the feasibility of it.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed to officers. So, colleagues, we have to make a decision. Got quite a lot to consider here. Lots of different policies and arguments that have been put forward. Let's just have a very short break, and then we obviously need to make a decision. Okay, we can resume now. Okay, so we have to make a decision, colleagues. Okay, Well, we've heard a lot of arguments. It's quite complicated because obviously this unusually is in an area that has a neighbourhood plan, which is not something that happens on a regular basis. I mean, it strikes me that the principal factors are really relating to the height and the design of the proposal on the one hand, which, broadly speaking, we've had quite a lot of criticism of. On the other hand, there is new housing, which we haven't really spoken very much about at all, but would have to be considered a benefit. We've heard about the idea that, which I think is very widely held, that in many locations, new office space is actually, it's sort of redundant before it's even been built. On the other hand, it's sort of is supported in the development plan as it actually stands, as we need to consider. But so I think it's very much there are factors on all directions. Who would like to go first? This is just thinking of ideas about what we're thinking. Tom, you go first.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, it is, I think it's a difficult case and one where there's no obvious obvious decision. It is clearly, I think, a significant improvement over the one that was previously rejected, which was obviously a lot bulkier and had a bigger impact. I think that this is really sort of on the edge. I think the 3 stories opposite the 2 stories is fine. And then if you had a step back, additional 1 story, 4 story, I think you probably have to say that's fine. 2 stories is pushing it, so it's really on the edge. But then, as you said, we do have to consider the fact that the people who aren't in the room today are the sort of 8 new families who would occupy those housing units, and in a borough where it's very difficult to build housing, and that's why we haven't met our housing delivery tests. I think there is also both a legal and a moral duty on us to try and add housing units where we can, so people can find homes. So I think the massing for me is really on sort of on the edge of what's acceptable, but because of the public benefit of the additional homes, I would be leaning in favour of approving it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an area I know well, and row of houses opposite is a very special row of houses. It's a part of the borough and this is going to make a significant difference. I totally agree. This is an unbalanced one way or the other, but this is going to make a difference to that road, and it's going to make a substantial difference to that road. So when we're weighing it up, it is looking at this in pure planning terms, and it's an interesting building. It's a well-designed building, but it's also going to make a difference to the area, and therefore one has to weigh all those factors up when one comes to make a decision.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I agree with both Tom and Councillor Hargreaves as well. But also, if the committee were to approve, obviously I'm part of that decision making as well, I think I would like to apply a condition on the privacy issue with overlooking if it's been approved. I'm not sure if that would be something that it's within our gift or it's already been proposed.
Let me just briefly explore if that is sort of possible. Perhaps Mrs. Ray, Fiona, can you help with that? If just briefly, I'm afraid, because we're making
Privacy issue. I only heard the end of that. Is it how to manage from the terraces? Was it the privacy issue? Apologies.
Yeah, I mean something that we could enforce through a material consideration with the way, with the windows. Probably have privacy.
The windows aren't bathroom windows. I think the living room and bedroom windows.
or on the other side?
I would,
Yeah.
just very quickly, through you, Chairman, apologies. I don't think we should have any restriction on glazing or fixing to the front or rear, but to the side you would have that open to you. Thank you.
I think that would be difficult
Right.
to do something like that. Okay.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Do you have any further comments about the application as a whole? No? Okay. Marwan, did you wish to just thoughts
Yes,
at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the objectors and the planning to add value to the area, and the officers who've done excellent work in exploring the opportunities there. I agree, it's a difficult case in the neighborhood plan. I welcome any development to add value and prosperity to our area. But at the same time, we need to hear very carefully with the developer addressing the concern of local residents who are here in force. And I agree with my colleague, Tom, any additional homes in the area is very welcome, but not at the expense of harmony in that neighborhood. For me, it's a balance, striking that balance. Regarding the roads, I know that area very well as well. I value that area, especially in the fronts where Victorian homes, people are proud of their homes. And for this development to have this huge impact, I would welcome a modification to work closely with the residents and addressing their needs, addressing their concern, which Mr. Chair, I did not feel that's been addressed properly, although I welcome the work and the due diligence you've done to add to the social values, to the commercial units, especially in your drawing, you highlighted the underpass is going to be the Imperial College underpass at the beginning of that area. So on the balance, I feel there is quite some work need to be done, especially to address the concern of our local residents, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments. Well, what I think we should do is that we should, I suggest that we put the recommendation, which is to grant, obviously with the necessary agreement attached, but the recommendation with an additional condition along the lines that Councillor Bennett suggested, that there is a landscaping condition with the implication of trees attached. No, bear with me. Yep.
Chairman, thinking about it a little bit more, it would actually have to be a Section 106 in the Section 106 agreement, because I think what would be required is for the applicants to pay for a feasibility study to see if it is possible or feasible for a tree to be planted in the highway, and if it isn't, then that's the end of it, and if it is, then we have a street tree contribution in order to plant the tree,
right,
because the applicant obviously couldn't plant the tree in the highway. So I think it's going to have to be part of the Section 106.
If technically that's the best way of doing it, I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, but there's no guarantee at all.
You're happy with that.
Be in.
Okay. No. Can you please not interrupt? Because so what I intend to do is I would like to put to the vote the recommendation with, as Lorna Barry has suggested, would actually need to be an amendment to the Section 106 agreement to give effect to the condition that Councillor Bennett raised about trees.
It won't be a condition.
Yeah, but it's the Section 106 agreement, exactly. Okay, so can I see those who are in favour of the recommendation with that amendment regarding the Section 106 agreement? Can I see those in favour? Can I see those against? Okay. So that is agreed. The recommendation is granted by 3 votes to 2. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.